This is my review of Jujutsu Kaisen, episode 16. We open with actually kind of a weird scene with like a paintbrush that puts a black stripe down a white blank canvas. It splits it into like two different things. There are like two doors. There's a red door and a blue door. The red door has A, the blue door has B. I don't know what all that symbolized really, but Toto starts talking about how someone can practice to use their hands a bunch, or someone can choose to practice to use their eyes, and that if you practice to use your eyes, your hands will also improve naturally with that. Basically, he's telling, I don't even know if he was talking to the story, it might have been an internal monologue, I don't know. But basically his point was, if you improve your ability to perceive things, you know, your, not necessarily your vision, but your ability to register things that you're seeing faster and stuff, that your reactions will improve and all your normal functions will improve. That was basically what he was saying. So like instead of, if say, for example, you're playing baseball, instead of practicing like your swing and practicing how hard you can hit the ball and how fast you can swing the bat and hit the ball, if you were say looking at a stopwatch or something, and you were trying to judge like how fast you can go from your like stationary stance to hitting the ball or something like that, that would improve. You would improve to a certain amount with that. But if you practice just keeping your eye on the ball, and when a pitcher throws it, you know, you just improve your ability to perceive that he's thrown it, and your reaction, that all of that would improve anyways. I think is basically the point he's making to have a comparison. There's a bit of a melee. It kind of, once again, looks awkward in that kind of style that we've been seeing in Jujutsu Kaisen, where the poses aren't quite there. They look awkward. Like the art is great, but the animation is just odd. They have the weird poses, and they had scenes where like, there was a scene where Itadori throws a punch at Toto, and the punch moves so slow, and then there's like a massive impact frame, like the punch did a bunch of damage. And there's a disconnect there where like his punch isn't going fast enough for that impact to feel like it was actually delivered. This has been an issue with Jujutsu Kaisen, it's anime. It's not in every scene, but there are scenes like this where like they try to draw like a movement too intricately, and it just ends up looking slow and awkward instead of, you know, instead of a punch being a snap. You know, normally it would be like they have their arm cocked back, a blur, and then their fist out. It would be like 3 frames, and instead with this, they're just like drawing a bunch of them like that, and it just ends up having this like slow effect like that, where someone throws a punch like that, and then there's like a big boom from it, and it just doesn't look right. After their little skirmish, Toto begins praising Itadori's ability to adapt to the situation, his fighting style. How before, if he was throwing a punch, he might block or flinch, but now if Toto's throwing a punch, Itadori will just immediately react to it and find a way around it. So he's getting better at fighting during this fight. Itadori gets Toto on the ground, and he's going to deliver one of his big divergent fists, but Toto throws his head up to stop Itadori's punch halfway before he can get up to full speed, which just reduces the impact entirely. And then he continues kind of teaching Itadori about his criticism of divergent fists, saying that Itadori's cursed energy is lacking behind. That's what the term he keeps using. he starts talking about how people channel cursed energy, and that's a normal thing to do. And he kind of gets into the whole like chi thing, where like your chi is stored at your gut, and it goes from there all throughout the body, and you can focus it in certain areas. He kind of explains that, but in terms of cursed energy. And he starts talking about letting it flow, and that you should be like nature and stuff, and you should be an ocean and all this stuff. And I didn't completely understand what he was talking about, but when he's done, he sort of says, okay, I understand it. All of his body is enraptured in cursed energy, and before that it was just his fists. So I think the point Toto was trying to make was that you should just let cursed energy flow throughout your body naturally, rather than focusing on channeling it to your fists. So basically Itadori's expelling cursed energy from everywhere, and then when he's using it in his fist, it'll be quicker and easier to get it to go where it needs to go, basically, because it's all already out there. He doesn't have to try and force it all in one area. It's just all out, and he can just make it zap there, basically, is the idea of that, as far as I understand it. And then there's more weird flashes of them being in high school together. Then the opening, and then we cut back to Nobara and Panda with the blonde-haired witch girl. Nobara insults Mai, which aggravates her. Throughout the episode, you kind of get the idea that those two are close, but we obviously haven't spent enough time with them for me to know really anything beyond that they seem to get along. They don't really have similar personalities, at least on service level, so I don't know what they would get along with, but whatever. She also starts insulting the robot of their group. She refers to the guy that has to speak in the ingredients of a rice ball as peppercorn, and she says they have a peppercorn as well, referring to the robot. And I'm assuming that she just means that they're an oddball out. I don't know what else she would be drawing a comparison between them other than that they're just both really odd. But she continues to kind of be aggravated, the blonde girl does. And then Panda, kind of like his ears twitch and his head kind of raises up, and he seems like he notices something, and then he gets shot in the shoulder and he falls down. It looks like he deflates a little bit. And then the robot comes out of the bushes saying that he's a corpse, well, he says like, I killed him, and then he says, well, he's a corpse, so that isn't quite right, or something like that. He's a corpse puppet or something. And he's getting ready to fight Nobara, and then the witch girl jumps down and says she'll fight Nobara, and calls him Mekomaru, so his name is Mekomaru. And then Panda jumps up and basically says that he's actually fine, and then he rushes Mekomaru and begins fighting Mekomaru. He gets a really good punch in, sends Mekomaru back. And then we see Mekomaru, what Mekomaru actually looks like, and he's this guy in a bathtub, and he's like got all these mummified bandages all over him, and he's missing an arm. He's got all kinds of tubes and shit going in the bathtub. It's bizarre. And Panda kind of remarks that they're similar, and that kind of pisses Mekomaru off. Mekomaru has a ability called Sword Option, and it like takes his arm and a bunch of blades shoot out of it, and this is boost on, and his hand, which is kind of like sharp claws, begins spinning like a drill, and then his elbow shoots out a jet propulsion thruster, and he like flies at Panda, but he misses him. And then Panda kind of has an internal monologue explaining that he kind of has an idea of where everyone stands except for Mekomaru, the witch, and Miwa. And he assumes that he and Mekomaru are going to be somewhat similar, but then Mekomaru reveals that he's actually a semi-first grade, which is a lot higher than Panda is, and he fires a big-ass laser. blasted Panda. Panda blocks it, and it seems like it squirts her thing, so it might be fire. I'm not sure. They don't really explain it very well. Then we get a cutaway explaining cursed corpses, and that they need a core inside them to operate. And the core is basically like the curse itself. And then that when it's placed inside a body, a corpse, then it works. It's able to use it like a body. And it shows him, the principal. The principal apparently made Panda, and it shows them like training and first like Fists of Fury, where they're throwing punches together, and it's pretty cool. Once again, I really like the principal's personality, so seeing that he's evolved to Panda is just nice. I really like him as a character. I really hope we see more of him. And then Panda goes up to Mechamaru and hits him with an Aura Barrage, where he's just beating the shit out of him. He gets him a nice grappling move and throws him down. And then he turns around and like slams his ass into him to send him flying. It's a move that's been in a lot of fighting video games. I won't say Dead or Alive had it, but there's a lot that have it. And that was just one example I think I've seen where that is a thing. Mechamaru, it kind of explains that he's different than Panda. Or, no, Panda explains that Mechamaru is different. It says he's being controlled remotely. And that his body is actually elsewhere. And he's just controlling the robot with his cursed energy. He's able to use it over distance. And Mechamaru basically explains that he has a heavenly pact where, like, he was born without an arm or either of his legs. His skin is extremely fragile, and he's a paraplegic, despite not having legs anyways. So his life is just fucked up, but in exchange for all that, he has incredible cursed energy they can use at a distance like this. He basically explains his life is hell, and he would trade all of his power if he could just have a normal life and a normal body. He fires a giant-ass laser fire blast thing out of his mouth. He puts his hands up to it to kind of focus it forward, it seems like. Panda realizes that Nabar is behind him, so he has to block it, and he does block it. Mechamaru gets ready to leave, assuming he's dead, but he's not. Panda's still there, and he's transformed into like a gorilla. He's got gorilla feet and I think gorilla hands. And overall, his body's a lot more muscular. But his mouth doesn't move anymore, which is strange. We get a cutback where the principal's telling Panda that he has a brother and sister. And Panda tells him, no, I don't. And then this is a weird scene, I guess it's supposed to be comedic, and the principal goes on to explain to him that his brother and sister will always be with him. And basically Panda explains that their cores exist inside of him, so he has 3 cores, a gorilla core, a panda core, and his sister's core, which we don't know anything about. And he can channel their power, and it changes his body, and he can use different kinds of power. It's pretty much shown that the gorilla core is a lot stronger than Panda's normal core, because Mechamaru uses some kind of a shield, and it like has just spikes coming out of his arm. His arm is like, I guess, heavily more armored, but the Panda's hand just goes right through it and just crushes it and throws him. So it's clear that he's a lot stronger, and then he kind of explains how the cores work, that the focus of the Panda core is just balance, a harmony between offense and defensive power, and all of his other traits. Gorilla is purely focused on attack, potency, and power, his ability to fight. We don't know about his sister, but we would assume that would be the other side, being more reserved, defensive, blocking, and protecting people. But the sister's core was the one that got shot initially, and then the Panda core got kind of wore out by the big-ass laser that Mechamaru used. So the gorilla core is all that's left, and the issue with the gorilla core is that it burns through cursed energy really fast, because obviously it amplifies Panda's physical state, his physical stature. So they kind of continue fighting. They end up on the rooftops of one of the buildings, and Panda kind of analyzes Mechamaru's options, stating that he can't use sword option anymore because he crushed that arm, so he can only like rely on his blasts and stuff, but he already thinks that those aren't working, so he's gonna have to focus on trying to hit his core, or he's gonna have to slash him. So he kind of knows what Mechamaru's gonna do, and he's confident he can beat him now. There's a nice bit of action, but once again the posing with some of the art is just kind of weird. It looks odd at times. But Mechamaru is using his the jets on his arms to fly around and shit, so I thought that was pretty cool. In one part, Panda has him down and he wraps his legs up around Panda's head and then uses his thrusters to push Panda through buildings. Again, the pose is hard here is like weird here, so it's hard to tell what he did. I think he pointed them back this way so that his body would go toward Panda, which forced Panda into the buildings, but I'm not sure. Because the way he had his legs wrapped around him, you'd think that the next thing would be to like flip and slam him into the ground, but obviously that isn't really an option in the position he was in. He blasts Panda again, and it really doesn't do anything. At this point, he's becoming reminiscent of Genos from One Punch Man. Panda kind of lands in front of him, and then he begins running away. And you see something in his hand for like half a second. And to me, it seemed like he was going after Nobara because he figures he can't beat Panda, and he put Panda back on the defensive. But then he just turns around and he throws a tile at Panda, so the tile is what he was holding. And Panda notices that he threw the tile, but then he kicks the tile and breaks it, turning it into shrapnel, I guess. And you'd naturally think the point of that would be that he would cover his eyes because the dust and shit might get in his eyes, but they don't really do anything with that. Panda just lands after he breaks the tile, and then he just flies past Panda. It's weird. The tile didn't seem to like translate to what was happening next. But then when Panda goes after Mechamaru, he spins around and ends up blasting Panda where he sees all of the cursed energy concentrated, believing that to be the core. And at first Panda's eyes go kind of dark and he falls over, and it seems that he hit Panda's core and it's over. But then Panda pops back up, grabs Mechamaru's arm, and then he kind of explains that he could, of course he knows his own weakness, that someone could tell where all his cursed energy was and attack that to destroy the core. So all he had to do was focus his cursed energy somewhere where his core wasn't to make it appear that the core was there. And that's exactly what he did, and it worked. And then he punches Mechamaru in the face, I believe, shattering its face armor and tearing off its arm, and then it's just done. And then they kind of talk for a minute. Mechamaru kind of has internal dialogue and external dialogue at the same time. He's just kind of depressed, and Panda just kind of tries to give him advice. He isn't really trying to be nice to him, he's just trying to give him advice, you know. It's not like a super optimistic and positive thing. Panda's just kind of neutral to him. He's just kind of like, hey, we aren't even enemies. We're not really supposed to be trying to kill each other, even if you don't like me, whatever. You know, he knows he doesn't really like him, but he doesn't care. And from all this, Panda just seems to have had a scorched like side of his face and ear, so he's not even really that injured. But he tells, Panda tells Mechamaru that if he ever needs help, he'll help him. And Mechamaru just kind of says, like, if you saw me you wouldn't really, would you really still consider helping me? So he thinks of himself as like some freak that no one would ever want to be around. Ignoring the fact that he's talking to a fucking panda. Panda kind of just talks about like he would never want to be a human. He's not jealous of humans. He doesn't really care about all this shit. He doesn't despise Mechamaru for being a human while he's a panda, the same way that Mechamaru despises Panda for being able to go out in sunlight and be normal. And we get an internal dialogue about Mechamaru kind of fantasizing about one day being able to get out of his bathtub and go and be with everybody in person. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. I don't think so. Not unless Mahito shows up and they make a deal and Mahito's able to just transfigure his body, then he might be able to do that. And Panda begins walking away and stuff, but then he realizes that he forgot something. He runs up to Mechamaru and asks to use his phone. And then we return to Maki and Miwa, which is a much more interesting battle because she's using a glaive. Maki is using a glaive while Miwa's using a sword, a katana specifically, so that'll be interesting. Very interesting battle. It has a lot better pose. Just this little bit has a lot better posing, a lot better choreography. The art and stuff just translates a lot better. And I'm assuming the fight will be better because it'll have like a full like stance, blurry swing, and then the weapon down here. And they can just do that in 3 frames instead of the shit they've been doing. At least that's how I hope. I hope this fight's a lot faster in the way it's drawn and stuff, so that it just looks better, because it should. I don't think it'll look bad, but we'll see. I'm very excited for the fight. I've already kind of mentioned I like Miwa and Maki a lot. And then we get the ending, and then the after credit scene is a humorous bit where Miwa, the witch girl, and Mai all want favors done by Mechamaru because they're nervous about being around Toto and the other guy. I think his name is Noga or something. I can't remember. The samurai dude. But they just want favors done by him and stuff. It was kind of humorous. And Mechamaru just kind of says, well, it's nice to be relied on. And so that was the end of that. Very excited to see Maki versus Miwa. I have high hopes for how that fight's going to go. I'm hoping that I enjoyed a lot more than this one. I didn't dislike this fight. I know I was critical of it. I'm just being objective. The art and stuff and the posing at times just looks really awkward. And again, some of those attacks do not translate. When someone's moving like that and then there's a big pop from their punch, that does not translate well at all. And there's a number of things to contribute to that. And I'm not an expert on animation. I know a bit about it, not like a whole lot, so that's my review of this episode. This slowed down a lot. I gotta say, this is like the 3rd episode of this tournament arc thing. This is the slowest that this fucking series has moved in a long time. Ever, really. Everything else would just be like event, boom, time skip event, boom, time skip event. Not like big time skips, but it would jump like days, weeks, whatever. And with this, we're just finally going like moment to moment. So that gives me hope for the future, but we'll see what the future holds. Oh, another thing I can say, very, very happy that we're getting focus on particular fights. I already talked about I don't really like when we're jumping from scene to from like one scenario to another scenario in episodes and stuff, and with this we just had to focus on Panda and Mechamaru, and I thought that was great. You could draw all of these fights going on at the same time, Maki versus Miwa, Itadori versus Toto, Nobara versus the Witch Girl, and Panda versus Mechamaru. You could draw all that at the same time, going on at the same time. But God, it just takes away from all of them to do that. And I'm so glad we just got focus on one. Because like I said, I like to just be immersed in the battle itself. I like to be immersed. And when you're jumping me from area to area to area to area, it takes the immersion away. There are times when that can be done well, but not all. The only reason they should add that should ever be done is if all of that is going to converge eventually into one place. Or if all those threads come together in one place. But if they're not, then they can be standalone like this, and I really appreciate this, and I'm very glad they're doing this. That's my final thoughts on this episode.